Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The rain drummed against the windshield like impatient fingers as Sarah pulled into the gas station, her headlights cutting through the October darkness. She'd been driving for 3 hours straight, eager to reach her sister's wedding rehearsal dinner, when her fuel gauge finally demanded attention. As she stepped out of her car, the cold air bit at her cheeks, and she noticed him immediately. A young man huddled near the building's entrance, his thin jacket no match for the autumn chill. He couldn't have been more than 19, with dark hair plastered to his forehead, and eyes that held a story she couldn't quite read. There was something about the way he stood, not quite begging, not quite waiting, that made her pause as she walked toward the store. "Excuse me," he called out softly, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I was wondering, would you happen to be heading north on Highway 87? Sarah stopped, her keys jingling in her hand. She'd learned to be cautious about strangers, especially at night, but something in his tone made her turn around. He wasn't demanding or aggressive, just desperate in a quiet, heartbreaking way. "I am," she said carefully, studying his face. "Why? My name's David," he said, taking a small step closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "I know this sounds crazy, but I really need to get to Cedar Falls. My grandmother, she's in the hospital, and I don't have a car or money for a bus ticket. I've been waiting here for hours, hoping someone might be going that way." Sarah felt her heart constrict. Cedar Falls was exactly where she was headed. Her sister lived just 20 minutes beyond it. She looked at David again, noting the way his hands shook slightly. Whether from cold or nerves, she couldn't tell. His jeans were worn but clean, and despite his obvious distress, there was something genuine about him that made her chest tighten. With sympathy, "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked, not unkindly, but with the caution of a woman who'd learned to protect herself. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, a hospital admission form, with his grandmother's name and room number. Even in the dim light, Sarah could see the genuine worry etched on his face. "She raised me," he said simply. "She's all I have left." Something in those words broke through Sarah's defenses. She thought of her own grandmother, who had passed away 5 years ago, and how she would have moved heaven and earth to be by her side in her final moments. "Okay," she said, surprising herself. "Get in." The relief that washed over David's face was so profound that Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "I promise I'm not dangerous or anything. I just ... thank you." As they settled into her car, Sarah couldn't help but notice the way David sat pressed against the passenger door, as if trying to make himself as small as possible, his hands folded tightly in his lap. The interior light illuminated his face for a moment, and she saw that he was actually quite handsome, with strong features and those remarkable eyes that seemed to hold depths she couldn't fathom. "I'm Sarah," she said as she pulled back onto the highway. "David," he replied, though he'd already told her. "I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. I haven't seen my grandmother in 3 months. And when the hospital called..." His voice trailed off, and Sarah glanced over to see him staring out the window, his jaw clenched tight. She wanted to offer comfort, but they were strangers, and she didn't know what words would help. "Tell me about her," Sarah said gently, turning up the heat as she noticed him still shivering. David's face softened, and for the first time since she'd met him, he almost smiled. "Her name's Eleanor. She's 82, and she's the strongest person I know. She worked 2 jobs to raise me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. Never complained. Never made me feel like a burden. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She sounds amazing. She is, David said, his voice thick with emotion. She taught me everything: how to be kind, how to work hard, how to treat people with respect. She always said that character isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when no one's looking. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the rain gradually lessening to a gentle patter. Sarah found herself stealing glances at David, noticing the way he unconsciously tapped his fingers against his leg, a nervous habit that somehow made him seem more human, more real. "What about you?" David asked suddenly. "Where are you headed?" "My sister's wedding," Sarah replied. "Well, the rehearsal dinner tonight, and then the wedding tomorrow. I'm the maid of honor." "That's exciting," David said, and she could hear him trying to inject some lightness into his voice despite his worry. "Big wedding?" "Huge," Sarah laughed. "My sister Emma has been planning this thing for 2 years. She's got every detail mapped out to the minute. I'm just hoping I don't trip walking down the aisle." David actually smiled at that, and Sarah felt something flutter in her chest. His smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger and somehow more vulnerable. "I bet you'll be beautiful," he said softly, then immediately flushed red. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ... "It's okay," Sarah said, surprised by how much his simple compliment affected her. "Thank you." They were crossing into Cedar Falls now, and Sarah could see David growing more tense with each mile. His hands had started shaking again, and she noticed him checking his phone repeatedly. "The hospital's just ahead," she said gently. "Do you want me to drop you at the main entrance?" "Yes, please," David said, then paused. "Sarah, I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to help me, and I know it was probably scary, picking up a stranger like that." Sarah pulled into the hospital parking lot and turned to face him. In the glow of the hospital lights, she could see the genuine gratitude in his eyes, but also something else, a loneliness that resonated deep in her chest. "We all need help sometimes," she said simply. David nodded, but he didn't immediately get out of the car. Instead, he sat there for a moment, staring at the hospital entrance as if gathering courage. "David," Sarah said softly, "are you okay?" He turned to her, and she saw tears glistening in his eyes. "What if I'm too late? What if she doesn't recognize me? She's been having some memory issues lately, and I haven't been able to visit as much as I should, because of work and school ... Without thinking, Sarah reached over and placed her hand on his arm. "Hey," she said gently. "She's going to know you. Love doesn't forget, even when the mind struggles. And even if she's having a bad day, your being there will matter. Trust me." David looked down at her hand on his arm, and Sarah realized how naturally the gesture had come. She started to pull away, but he covered her hand with his own. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." They sat there for a moment, connected by this simple touch, and Sarah felt something shift inside her. She barely knew this young man, but there was something about him that called to a part of her she'd kept carefully guarded for years. "I should go," David said finally, but he didn't move. "David," Sarah said, surprising herself with her boldness, "here's my card. It has my number on it. Will you let me know how she's doing? I'll be worried about you both." David took the card, his fingers brushing against hers. "You really want to know?" "Yes," Sarah said, and she meant it completely. "I really do." David smiled then, that same transformative smile that had caught her off guard earlier. "I'll call you," he promised. "And Sarah?" I hope your sister's wedding is everything she dreamed it would be. He leaned over and kissed her cheek gently. A soft, grateful kiss that sent warmth spreading through her entire body. Then he was gone, jogging through the light rain toward the hospital entrance. Sarah sat in her car for a long moment, her hand pressed to her cheek where she could still feel the warmth of his lips. She'd given rides to strangers before, but never had such a simple act of kindness. Left her feeling so affected. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Where are you? The rehearsal dinner started 20 minutes ago. Sarah quickly typed back. On my way. Got delayed helping someone. But as she drove toward her sister's house, her mind kept drifting back to David. There had been something about their connection that felt significant, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her with such genuine gratitude, or the way his smile had made her feel like the most important person in the world. Even if just for a moment. The rehearsal dinner was already in full swing when Sarah arrived. Her sister Emma rushed over, resplendent in a flowing dress that made her look like she was already floating on air. Sarah, thank God you're here, Emma said, pulling her into a hug. I was starting to panic that something had happened to you. I'm fine, Sarah said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Just helped someone who needed a ride to the hospital. That's my sister, Emma said with a proud smile. Always rescuing strays. Sarah wanted to protest that David wasn't a stray, but she couldn't explain why the description bothered her so much. Instead, she focused on the evening ahead, making small talk with relatives and listening to Emma's fiancé Jake practice his speech for the dozenth time. But even as she smiled and laughed and played the part of the devoted sister, part of her mind remained with David. She found herself checking her phone repeatedly, hoping for a text or call that would tell her his grandmother was okay. Dot wasn't. Until she was getting ready for bed in her hotel room that her phone finally rang. The number wasn't one she recognized, but something in her chest leaped with hope. Hello? Sarah? David's voice was soft, tired, but there was something lighter in it than there had been earlier. It's David. From tonight. David, Sarah said, settling onto her bed. How is she? How are you? She's going to be okay, David said. And Sarah could hear the relief in his voice. It was pneumonia, but they caught it in time. She's responding well to the antibiotics. Oh, thank God, Sarah breathed. I've been worried about you both all evening. You have? David asked. And there was something wondering in his voice. I wasn't sure if you'd want to hear from me. Of course I did, Sarah said. I told you I'd be worried. There was a pause. And then David said, She remembered me. As soon as I walked into the room, she smiled and said, There's my boy. I started crying right there in front of everyone. Sarah felt tears prick her own eyes. That's wonderful, David. I'm so happy for you both. Sarah, David said, his voice growing more serious. I keep thinking about tonight, about what you did for me. You didn't know me from anyone, but you trusted me enough to help. I can't stop thinking about how different things might have been if you hadn't been there. I'm just glad I was. Sarah said softly. There's something else, David said, and she could hear him take a deep breath. I know this might sound crazy, but I felt something when we were talking tonight. Like we were supposed to meet. I know that probably sounds ridiculous. It doesn't, Sarah interrupted, her heart racing. It doesn't sound ridiculous at all. Really? David asked, and she could hear the hope in his voice. Really, Sarah confirmed. I felt it too. They talked for another hour, sharing stories about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Sarah learned that David was studying to be a teacher, that he loved old movies and wrote poetry in his spare time. She told him about her work as a graphic designer her love of hiking, and her secret dream of traveling to Ireland. "I should let you go," David said finally, though neither of them seemed to want to end the conversation. "You have a wedding tomorrow, and I should get back to the hospital." "David," Sarah said, taking a leap of faith, "the wedding isn't until 5 tomorrow evening. Would you like to have coffee or something? I mean, if your grandmother is doing better and you can get away for a little while." The pause that followed made Sarah's heart race with anxiety. Had she overstepped? Had she misread the connection between them? "I'd love that," David said finally, and Sarah could hear the smile in his voice. "More than you know." They made plans to meet at a small cafe downtown, and as Sarah finally hung up the phone, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the flutter of new possibility, the excitement of potential love. She'd gone to bed that night expecting to wake up and prepare for her sister's wedding. Instead, she found herself lying awake, thinking about a young man with kind eyes and a beautiful smile who had appeared in her life like an answered prayer. The next morning, Sarah woke with a sense of anticipation she couldn't quite contain. She dressed carefully for her coffee date with David, choosing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes and made her feel confident but not overdressed. The cafe was a charming little place with exposed brick walls and the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans. Sarah arrived a few minutes early and chose a table by the window, her heart racing every time the door opened. When David finally walked in, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. In the daylight, he was even more handsome than she'd remembered. He'd changed clothes and styled his hair, and there was a lightness to his step that hadn't been there the night before. "Hi," he said, sliding into the seat across from her, and his smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Hi," Sarah replied, suddenly feeling shy. "How's your grandmother this morning?" "Much better," David said, his eyes bright with relief. "She's awake and alert, and she's already complaining about the hospital food, which the nurses say is a good sign." Sarah laughed. "That definitely sounds like a good sign." They ordered coffee and pastries, and the conversation flowed as easily as it had the night before. In the light of day, Sarah found herself even more drawn to David. He was thoughtful and funny, with a quick wit and a way of looking at her that made her feel like the most fascinating person in the world. "Can I ask you something?" David said, as they walked along the river after finishing their coffee. "Of course. Last night, when you picked me up, were you scared? I mean, I know it was dangerous, giving a ride to a stranger." Sarah considered the question. "I should have been scared," she said honestly. "But I wasn't. There was something about you that made me feel safe. Like I could trust you." David stopped walking and turned to face her. "You saved my life last night," he said seriously. "I don't mean literally, though. Maybe I do. But you saved me from spending the night, wondering if I'd make it to the hospital in time. Wondering if my grandmother would die, thinking I didn't care enough to come." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "David. I know we just met," he continued, stepping closer. "I know this is crazy, but I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to meet you. Like everything that happened, my grandmother getting sick, my car breaking down, me being stranded at that gas station. It all happened so that I would be there when you drove by." Sarah's heart was racing now, and she could see the same emotion. She was feeling reflected in David's eyes. "I feel the same way," she whispered. David reached up and cupped her face gently. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, and when his lips met hers, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, Sarah felt like her world had shifted on its axis. "I have to go," she said reluctantly. I need to help my sister get ready for her wedding. I know, David said, but he didn't let go of her hands. Sarah, after the wedding, could I see you again? I mean, I know you probably live far away. And I'm just a college student with no money, but… David, Sarah interrupted, squeezing his hands. I live in Portland. That's only 3 hours from here. And yes, I definitely want to see you again. The smile that spread across David's face was radiant. Really? Really, Sarah confirmed. In fact, if you don't have plans tonight, would you like to be my date to the wedding? I mean, I know it's presumptuous, and you probably want to stay. With your grandmother. She's being discharged this afternoon, David said quickly. The doctor said she can go home as long as she takes it easy. And I would love to be your date. But I don't have anything to wear to a wedding. Sarah laughed. We'll figure something out. Jake's about your size, and I'm sure Emma would be thrilled to have another guest. She loves love stories. As they walked back toward the cafe where Sarah had left her car, David took her hand, and Sarah felt a warmth spread through her entire body. She'd come to Cedar Falls for her sister's wedding, but she was leaving with something far more precious, the beginning of what felt like the love story she'd been waiting for her entire life. There's something I should tell you, David said, as they reached her car. About last night, about why I was really at that gas station. Sarah felt a flutter of concern. What do you mean? David took a deep breath. I wasn't just waiting for a ride. I was actually thinking about giving up. About not going to the hospital at all. David, why? Because I was scared, he admitted. Scared that I'd get there and she wouldn't remember me. Scared that I'd been a terrible grandson. Too busy with my own life to visit her as much as I should have. Scared that it would be too late to tell her how much I love her. Sarah's heart ached for him. But you didn't give up. No, David said, looking into her eyes. Because you showed up. You reminded me that sometimes people help each other just because it's the right thing to do. You gave me hope that maybe I wasn't as alone in the world as I thought. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks. You're not alone, she whispered. Not anymore. David pulled her into his arms, and as they held each other in the parking lot of that small cafe, Sarah knew that this was the moment her life truly began. She'd spent so many years focused on her career, on being independent, on protecting her heart from the possibility of being hurt. But in less than 24 hours, a young man who had needed nothing more than a ride had shown her what it felt like to be truly connected to another person. I love you, David whispered against her hair, and though Sarah knew it was too soon, knew they'd only just met, she also knew that sometimes the heart recognizes its home immediately. I love you too, she whispered back, and meant it completely. As they drove back toward town, Sarah's phone buzzed with another text from Emma. Please tell me you're on your way. I'm having a complete meltdown about my hair. Sarah laughed and showed David the text. Welcome to the chaos that is my sister's wedding day. I can't wait to meet her, David said, and Sarah felt her heart swell with happiness. She'd driven to Cedar Falls thinking she was just playing her role as the dutiful sister, the supportive maid of honor. Instead, she'd found the person who would change everything. As they pulled into the hotel parking lot, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the beautiful irony of it all. Sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest acts of kindness. Sometimes all it takes is being willing to say yes when someone asks for help. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to open your heart to a stranger, you discover that they're not a stranger at all, they're the person you've been waiting for your entire life. The wedding was beautiful, and David fit in perfectly with Sarah's family, charming everyone with his gentle manner and obvious devotion to Sarah. As they danced under the stars to the band's final song, Sarah knew that she'd found her happily ever after in the most unexpected way. So, David murmured in her ear as they swayed together, was it worth the risk? Picking up a stranger at a gas station. Sarah pulled back to look at him, this man who had appeared in her life like a gift from the universe. It was worth everything, she said, and kissed him as the last notes of the song faded into the night dot in the end. He had just wanted a ride. But what he'd given her in return was so much more. He'd given her a future filled with love, laughter, and the knowledge that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we choose to trust our hearts over our fears. Their love story had begun with a simple act of kindness on a rainy October night, and Sarah knew it would continue for the rest of their lives, growing stronger with each passing day. Because the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself, someone who sees your heart and chooses to stay. And as they drove home together the next morning, David's grandmother's blessings still ringing in their ears, Sarah knew that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single step of faith, or in their case, the simple decision to offer a ride to a stranger who turned out to be the love of her life.